Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chat. Not as good as 15 hours, but hey, it's something. Now, this episode is the first of a new saga because I have finally hit 700 subscribers. To which I say, come on, guys, I celebrated my 200th episode 2 weeks ago. You couldn't give me that? You couldn't give it so that these things overlap? Well, not 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. You couldn't have, given those two, things on the same day, so I wouldn't feel the need to have to do, two specials? I mean, this isn't going to be a special, obviously. The title doesn't say 700 sub special, so this ain't a special. Although I will say, now that I'm getting bigger, I think I might have to start spreading my clout. So I think I found out a new segment that I kind of want to do. This is also going to be me kickstarting a brand new series on this channel, probably. But anyways, what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be taking smaller channels and shouting them out. No holds bars. No, you don't got to give me nothing. You don't got to sub on Patreon to do that. You don't owe me nothing. I'm just giving you, I'm just sharing, I'm just redistributing the subscribers. If you think that you deserve this kind of treatment, by all means, let me know. I'll check you out. I'll verify if you're I don't even care if half of these people at this beginning part screw me over in the future. I don't care. I know I could be potentially setting myself up for a new John Munitz, but hey, I don't care. If I think you're worth it, you're worth it. The first person I'm shouting out is Inkaíno. Inkaíno was brought up to me due to some recent drama that's been going around, because a person who we shall not name was recently on a mutual show, and in the shit show that was the aftermath, Inkaíno was one of the people that was basically looking around and sharing a bunch of stuff about the episode, that particular segment of that particular episode. They called me a king for pressing this person in the chat of that live stream, and then that led me to check out their channel, and lo and behold, it's basically a stream. It's basically I was about to use a terminology that he doesn't like, but it's basically they stream and then they post the segments on their channel, and they have been doing incredibly poorly. 139 subs and 73 views in his latest episode. They deserve more subs. They 100% deserve more subs. Especially, we need more Latinos. We need more Latino content creators on LeftTube. Come on. If you like the sort of same style that my podcasts are, they are of that vein. It could just be me, but it literally is just when I was seeing their interactions, especially during this big drama. Well, this big drama, but this big meltdown. It was basically it's kind of surprising how similar we were, actually. Especially in our responses. What are our biggest responses to this unnamed individual was essentially the same thing. Look, if you want to talk crap, square up. But yeah, check out their channel or their Twitch or whatever. They're probably bigger than me on Twitch. Granted, I don't have a Twitch, so it's not a high bar to get to, but, check them out. I think they deserve more support and all that stuff, especially considering they, do actual activism. Can you believe that? But now, let's get right into the news. The first news is a actually really sad one. A Mexican activist by the name of Rosario Ybarra passed away at the age of 95. For those who do not remember, Rosario Ybarra is actually the first woman to run for president in Mexico. She ran under a Trotskyist New Left type party, was the first candidate to run on legalizing gay marriage in Mexico, and her party ran a bunch of openly LGBTQ candidates for the Chamber of Duties and the Chamber of Deputies, not duties. I guess the meme lives on. She then ended up serving one term in the Chamber of Deputies as a member of the Democratic Revolution, Party of the Democratic Revolution, and Labor Party, and it's genuinely been a well-liked activist figure in the Mexican left. Even AMLO gave a condolence to her death because of the prominent role that she had played. Granted, her and her daughter are AMLO allies. I mean, that's part of it. Like, she's been a huge figure for the Mexican left, and now she is dead. Very unfortunate. I mean, I didn't support either of her presidential runs. You know, there were bigger left-wing candidates in the race. But, again, her role cannot be overlooked. She's a very, I keep repeating myself, prominent figure in the Mexican left. She's an activist. She was the first female presidential candidate, and she will be missed. Now, next story is actually kind of a mix of two stories. You see, this is the first episode that I'm recording since the French election has been decided. And lo and behold, no surprises, Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron are going to be moving on to the next round. And at this point, I kind of stopped caring. But also, interestingly enough, what many people have basically, like, what everybody was saying long before, well, I mean, what everybody on the left was saying long before the day of was proven 100% right, because Mélenchon was literally within an earshot of making it into the runoff. And if any of the left-wing candidates, well, I think if any of the mainstream left-wing candidates, communists, Greens, and the Socialist Party, if any of them had dropped out, there was a chance that Mélenchon would have actually made it to the runoff. Spoiler effects and all that jazz. But basically, Mélenchon has been, like, I mean, even though he lost, he's again been proven right. And the theory that I'm laying out is that the Mélenchon wing of the French left is essentially going to be the new left of France. And this big showing definitely indicates that there might be it's basically the same thing that happened with Trump. When Trump got elected, like, there was a pendulum shift to the left, and, like, the rise of, like, the Squad and Justice Dems and all that other stuff, which is actually a really good segue, which is a shame that it was a foreign news story, so it had to be in the beginning. But Mélenchon has been taking a sort of, like, victory lap. He's made it, like, abundantly clear, like, he knows that he's the winner of he knows that in the French left he's the winner. He has essentially become the new French left. And one big thing that I've been saying is that this election will prove, like, this election will be the thing that kills the PS, like the Socialist Party. And one thing that just happened might have solidified that fact, because La France Insoumise has announced that they will not be joining in an alliance with the Socialist Party for the upcoming legislative elections, which I take as this is basically the proof that the French Socialist Party is dead. But the big question remains is, what type of dead are they? Like, are they going to be a party that stays around but then effectively does nothing, like the Reform Party? Are they going to actually, like, dissolve? Are they essentially just going to become a new back burner party for Mélenchon? We don't know. That's what's going to be played out in this upcoming election, both presidential and, like, the upcoming legislative election. If I had to take a wild guess, I would say that the PS is probably going to be sort of half dead. Like, there'll still be people who run as Socialist Party candidates, and there will be, like, basically appealing to that sort of, like, social democratic type form of politics. But at the end of the day, I don't know if they are going to officially, like, be named, like, they could I think also they could effectively just decide that they're not going to run any presidential candidates anymore and essentially just back whoever the top left candidate is. But again, we'll have to wait and see about that. Speaking of legislative elections and what we have to wait and see for, something very interesting happened in a Colorado seat for the House of Representatives. It was in District 1, which is currently held by Democratic incumbent Diana DeGette. And she has had a primary challenger for a while named Neil Wallia. I haven't talked about Neil Wallia because, I mean, I don't know the specifics. I think it was something like DeGette is a member of the Medicare for All caucus or something like that. And I was just like, I don't know if this is a viable chance, especially also with the thing of, like, in Colorado, you have to go through this weird process to even be considered a candidate in the election, where essentially it's like you either have to collect a certain amount of signatures or you have to win 30% of the vote in a conference. And if I remember correctly, you can only pick one, or essentially candidates usually just put all their eggs in one basket and sometimes it blows up in their face. Like, I think in the Colorado Senate race in the last cycle, there were a lot of progressive candidates that thought like they were going to win a decent amount of the vote in the conference, but then they lost. You know, like Stephanie Rose Spalding. And this seat was I was basically like holding my tongue, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? And this controversy actually made me go, I think I might endorse Neil Walia, which I have, because here's what happened. You know, the Colorado Working Families Party is one of the groups that were basically helping Neil Walia to get on the ballot and like saying like, we endorse Neil Walia alongside Sol Sandoval in Colorado District 3. So basically what happened was Neil Walia actually managed to get on the ballot. Like, he managed to collect enough signatures and actually managed to get on the ballot. And that was like, wow, that was impressive. Color me impressed. But here's the thing. Right after he managed to get on the ballot, the Colorado Working Families Party pulled their endorsement of Walia. And they gave this incredibly vague answer as to why, saying that they concluded that Neil Walia was not interested in running a serious campaign. To which most people went, what? Wait, really? Like, I mean, the fact that he was able to gather all those signatures probably indicates that Walia is very interested in seeking a serious campaign. And if there is more information that you have, kindly let us know. But they essentially kept that entire process vague, which the Working Families Party kind of has a history with. In fact, I think I might know where my next episode of this potential series might be about. So yeah, at least give Neil Walia a look. If you might be pleasantly surprised about his campaign. But something in that story actually made me realize I should transition to this story and not a different one. We're going to be talking about another congressional race. Illinois District 1. For those who don't know, Illinois District 1 is a race that has essentially been kind of a crapshoot. What has happened is the incumbent representative, Bobby Rush, decided that he was going to drop out and let someone else be the new representative. And what he tried to do on day one was try to mitigate any sort of primary challenge, so he just picked a random candidate and said, I endorse you. But a lot of people have not taken that bullet. And there have been, I think, as of right now, there are 20 candidates in the race. Keep in mind this is also just a primary, because a deep blue seat is basically like a magnet for everybody to run. And as such, a lot of people, as I have said, are actually running. And what I've said is that deep blue seats are also golden opportunities for progressives. However, this race seems to be another one that they kind of don't want to win, because there are quite a number of candidates that are the quote-unquote progressive candidates in the race, either running rhetorically as a progressive or actually as a progressive, or a mix of both. Like, I mean, I briefly supported a candidate by the name of Jamal Cole, but then I have since pulled his endorsement, not for any particular, like, bad reasons, but it's just, like, a bunch of other names just started jumping in. It's like, I don't know what to do. Like, there's this guy called Michael Thompson who's endorsing a person who's supposedly a progressive in another seat, so he's trying to, like, build himself as a progressive. Kirby Bergens at least supports Medicare for All, so he's also running as a progressive. Then there's Stephanie Rose Spalding, who moved all the way from Colorado to run in this seat. But the most prevalent one to jump into the scene is Jonathan Jackson. And for those who don't know why that's important, it's because Jonathan Jackson is the son of Jesse Jackson and the brother of Jesse Jackson Jr., who is a former U.S. representative. So the Jackson name is kind of very important in this race. And there's been a lot of issues like, oh, is he, like, what's going to happen? Because there's a ton of left-wing voices in the race. We don't necessarily know who to back. And some of the ones who, like, I mean, we might back, I don't know, like Jonathan Jackson. For some reason, he doesn't seem to support Medicare for All. Like, I mean, like, okay, there's a lot of weirdness about certain candidates. It's I mean, I like a bunch of them, but it's like, why? What are you doing here? Well, I'm not entirely sure what to do. Like, the two ones I'm kind of divided on at this particular moment are Stephanie Rose Spalding and Jonathan Jackson. And it's kind of for a lot of reasons. Like, Stephanie Rose Spalding, she's a progressive. We all know who she is. I mean, if you don't know who she is, she was a progressive candidate in Colorado District 5 in 2018. And she was also she was a candidate for the Senate seat in Colorado before she lost the bid. But then she moved to Illinois, apparently, and is now running in this seat. To which I was like, wait, really? She actually did that? Really weird carpetbagging, but okay. And Jonathan Jackson, which, like, he seems to support some progressive things, but it's like, do you support all of it? Because it's like, he's the son of Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson was basically borderline socialist in his 1988 presidential run and his 1984 presidential run. And he was basically just borderline socialist, period. But Jonathan Jackson, for some reason, he doesn't even support Medicare for all on his site. I looked at his site, and he says, like, I support expanding healthcare. I support the Affordable Care Act. It's like, but what about Medicare for all? Like, why not that? And it's weird because he endorsed Bernie in 2016, so it's like, why not just go all in? You're already at a tip-top advantage. And it seems like I'm not the only person who seems to have this divide, because even some progressives progressives in the House are actually kind of divided, because 2 congressional endorsements have already rolled in this seat, at the very least. 2, I think. At last check, I was just on the wiki page, so I think it was 2. Cori Bush has endorsed Stephanie Rose Spalding and has made campaign appearances with her, not in the state, but like in like a general like black women rally together support things of like, we're gonna support some progressive black women in the House. But of course, the one that brought my attention to this was, of course, my boy Chuy Garcia, who decided that he was going to back Jonathan Jackson. And you might say, does that prove that Jonathan Jackson's a true progressive? Well, maybe, maybe not. Because in the Illinois District 13 race, Chuy Garcia is backing the less progressive candidate who is most likely to make it to the election. So is he just backing the person who's most likely to win? I don't know. I would at the very least say that he probably knows the area better than we do, because he lives in Illinois, he lives in Chicago, so he probably has a better understanding of like Illinois areas than I do. So and especially, it's like, come on, it's Jesse Jackson's son, so he's probably got a better chance than the rest of the candidates. So maybe we should back him, maybe we shouldn't. I'm gonna at least wait to see if he updates his campaign website to say Medicare for all, so I can at least say, maybe I won't even wait for that. Maybe I'll just go, okay, I'll back Jonathan Jackson. But I don't know. I might even just sit out this race because things are getting way too complicated. I hope we don't bungle this up, and I hope we make the right choice. Speaking of making the right choices, it seems that Democrats are divided over another House race. Okay, so in Oregon, like, for those who don't know, Oregon got a brand new seat in the House of Representatives. They will be getting a 6th congressperson. The question is, who will this person be? And 9 people have decided to step up to the plate. And the Democratic Party has essentially decided who they will choose for the nomination. Like, they've essentially, like how they always do, the House Democrats have made their decision. The House Majority PAC, the largest super package supporting Democratic House candidates, threw its weight behind Carrick Flynn, a candidate backed by a cryptocurrency-linked super PAC. Now, this has basically been a shit show for a number of reasons. The biggest one seeming to come from Bold PAC, the candidates, like the PAC of like a bunch of Hispanic and Latina progressives, well, not progressives, but like Latina members of the House, who have basically been like, this is a majority-minority seat, and there are 4 minority women running for this seat, and you have snubbed all of them in favor of a white man? To which I say, yeah, that's incredibly cringe. I haven't looked much into the Oregon District 6 race. I don't even know if Carrick Flynn is going to be the winner of the seat, because I think there's at least one person who's like a prominent individual in the area. So we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. And the last news story comes from... It was originally just this story, but then I decided to add a little bit of flame to another piece of the fire because people will get mad at me if I don't. Actually, I don't think people who watch this channel will. But it's just for the sake of clarity to understand that this isn't just a one-person thing. Okay, so recently, Dianne Feinstein... Many people have been pointing out that Dianne Feinstein's memory is rapidly deteriorating, according to 4 of her colleagues. And they have stated that at memorial services, Feinstein spoke of a dead person in the present tense. One lawmaker said that they had to reintroduce herself to Feinstein, well, themselves, I just assumed her for some reason. One lawmaker said that they had to reintroduce themselves several times to Dianne Feinstein during the meeting. And, basically, Dianne Feinstein, her mental health seems to be deteriorating. Gee, I wonder why an 88-year-old U.S. Senator has deteriorating mental health. The fact that Dianne Feinstein is still in the Senate is embarrassing. She is literally 88 years old. She is literally so old that in the 2021 recall election, the Republican candidate was able to turn out voters because he was like, when she dies, I will get to appoint her replacement. That should not be a thing that a candidate for governor should have to be able to run on and actually be like, he might actually get to do that. And Democrats were able to use that as the thing because they're like, oh, we're so scared about Feinstein. It's like, the candidate that the majority of progressives wanted to run against her is literally half her age. Allison Hartson is currently 41 years old. And Kevin De Leon, the person who managed to make it to the runoff with her, is 55. It is embarrassing that she has not retired or have been replaced yet. And don't worry, there's another person who is literally her exact same age in the Senate, Chuck Grassley, who has decided he will be running for re-election this year. He will literally be in his 90s if he lives to the end of this term that he wants. This is how ridiculous this situation is. The leading candidate for the Democratic nomination in that seat is currently 33 years old. When she was born, Grassley was not only 55, but he was in his second Senate term. Heck, I am literally at the point where I will basically support the Mexican styles of re-election bids. You either just don't get one, or if you do, you get one and that's it. And since we don't got no proportional representation, we can't have any people trying to cheat their way back into government. We seriously need term limits. Period. I don't care if we have to finagle our way into some sort of weird new system. We need some term limits now. By the next election cycle, we should have a completely brand new Congress. Hey, speaking of, the main topic of this video, this is probably going to be me starting a brand new series on this channel, which is basically just me ripping off another series of mine. For those who don't understand, this series is basically going to be thoughts on, but for political parties or political organizations. You know, my problems with Justice Democrats, my problems with the Green Party, my problem with the Working Families Party, my problem with Democratic Socialists for America, etc., etc. Basically, as the title says, give my problems with them. And I might say, why not just put them into Thoughts On? Well, Thoughts On is really supposed to be about an individual. Granted, I've also used it to talk about, political, collectives, channels. But, there's essentially supposed to be about, the online sphere and online, political figures or, pundit figures and such This would be more focused on, like, actual political organizations trying to do stuff. And I might also ask, why such a negative title? My problems with? Well, generally, political organizations seem to have a lot more problems, but don't worry, I'll also give them benefits of the doubt and give them, like, praise in some regards as well. But this one seems to be more focused on the negatives because political organizations have a lot more faults given certain things. And to kickstart the series, we're going to be talking about one that I don't see get talked about a lot. This is one that is usually, like, not, like, I mean, like I said, it's not talked about a lot. When I think they are kind of the most problematic political organization in this, like, sphere that I can think of. And you'll see why as I get into it. Now, first, some background. What is Brand New Congress? Well, Brand New Congress was one of those, like, progressive groups founded in the wake of the Bernie 2016 run. You know, like Our Revolution, Justice Dems, Movement for the People's Party, People for Bernie. Each of them sort of, like, branching out in their own way. You know, Our Revolution was meant to be more like a general political, like, grouping. Justice Democrats was, of course, founded by, basically, like, kickstarted by people who were of the online political sphere, who wanted to translate, like, some of the online movement for Bernie to real life. One was basically made to basically kickstart a brand new political party. What was the thing that would set Brand New Congress apart from all the rest? Well, you get it in the name, Brand New Congress. They didn't intend to just be like, we need to primary some corporate Democrats to take over the Democratic Party like Justice Dems was. Their goal was right there in the name. They wanted to make a brand new Congress. And to entail that, you can't just run against corporate Democrats. You have to also run against Republicans. And with that, they even had an interesting idea. They actually wanted to run Republicans against Republicans. One of the first leaders of the group was Rob Riercy, an evangelical Republican who happened to support progressive values, and another Republican was running on the slate as well, Mark Whitmire. He then later switched to an independent bid. And another thing that set them apart was that, unlike Justice Democrats and Our Revolution, they didn't seek to build bridges with the people who were currently in Congress. Like, Our Revolution was started literally right at the tail end of the Bernie bid, so they were backing a bunch of Democrats across the United States already, who were basically elected on the Our Revolution slate, so they had some incumbents already in, and Justice Democrats basically started to build inroads with some members of Congress at the time, Pramila Jayapal, Raul Grijalva, and Ro Khanna. Brand New Congress was literally like, did our name not set you off? We want to primary all of you. Granted, presumably they would be last. They didn't endorse any incumbent members of Congress. They would later go back on that when they actually ended up getting members elected to Congress. But, you know, yeah, it wouldn't make any sense for them to be like, okay, we got AOC elected. Now it's time to endorse a primary opponent to her. It would be a never-ending cycle at that point. Now, here's the thing. On paper, that sounds really good. I don't oppose that idea. It did a good job at setting them apart from the rest of the progressive organizations. Like, oh, like, I mean, come on. Were some of these places any different from, like, Democracy for America or PDA? That were basically just, like, more run Dems. Come on. And BNC put a lot of energy into showing this was a little bit more than just, oh, we're just going to run candidates. And then, like, put them on, like, a joint fundraiser thing. Like, this was more than that. They were going to do a lot more to indicate that this was more than just that. It was a movement. They would do small things, like do some candidate photo ops, like send everybody together to get, like, campaign merch and then put them on, like a picture, like a banner for their social media. But also they do, like, bigger things, like help independent media have access to them. Like with what happened with Humanist Report, when he interviewed one Brand New Congress candidate, and Brand New Congress basically said, hey, we would like to have more of our slate appear on your show. Here is literally every single one of their emails. The people they have gotten elected. AOC, Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib. You know, they've done really well. However, as we learn, the organizations are not perfect. I mean, we all know the controversy surrounding Justice Dems and Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kalinske, and all that drama. We know the issue of many of these progressive organizations backing someone who we probably wouldn't necessarily view as a progressive. We know the critiques of sheepdogging into the Democratic Party, various criticisms of who they elect, etc., all this stuff. But one of the problems is this is usually levied at the bigger boys, Our Revolution, Justice Dems, and even DSA, who isn't even necessarily part of this field. Because it was not made by the Bernie movement, it was a thing that was reinvigorated by the Bernie movement. And B and C usually slips under the radar. In fact, so much so that many people actually legitimately go Justice Democrats is cringe, Brand New Congress is cool. However, I would argue that the flaws of Brand New Congress are actually more noticeable and more egregious than any of the flaws that Justice Democrats or even Our Revolution can do. And as I go through it, you'll kind of see where I'm coming from. And it's a thing that you might be familiar with in idea, but not necessarily in this way. See, one of the biggest problems that progressive organizations face is usually in regards to who they endorse and who they don't endorse. Sometimes they endorse what we believe is the wrong candidate. The first one I remember for Justice Democrats was many people were mad that Justice Democrats decided to kickstart another person to run for Senate in California with Allison Hartson, rather than endorsing the person who was perceived to be the progressive choice in that race, David Hildebrand. And a more recent example for them would be when they supported Georgette Gomez over Josie Caballero. An example for Our Revolution would be them backing Karen Carter-Peterson over Gary Chambers in the 2021 Louisiana Special House race. Generally, people get mad at them for skipping certain candidates to endorse, like Shahid Buttar or Cenk Uygur, etc., But the thing is, that can usually be explained away. Is it necessarily 100% vindicates them? Of course not. No. But here's the explanation that is usually given. The candidates that they endorse are usually the more progressive options of the viablest candidates. If I remember correctly, Josie got 7th place in the race. Meanwhile, Georgette made it to the runoff. And it was widely expected that Gary Chambers would not necessarily do so hot. But then in retrospect, many people go, maybe if Our Revolution endorsed him, he would have been pushed over the edge. So many people complain these organizations snub these probably more progressive candidates in our eyes in favor of endorsing a person who's less progressive to us, but more progressive than the other leading candidate in the race. Brand New Congress seemingly has the opposite problem. Usually, they snub the viable progressive candidate in favor of backing a smaller candidate in the race who really doesn't have a shot at winning, either in retrospect or even at the time. I started noticing this around the 2020 race when I was wait, this candidate that they backed got 5% of the vote. And then I'm wait. Then I look back and I'm wait, yeah, a lot of their candidates really don't do so hot. But then I think about wait, but there was this, why did they endorse this guy? Why didn't they endorse this person? And it's a similar thing to the Gary Chambers situation. A lot of people say if Our Revolution had endorsed him, he would have probably been pushed over the edge and he would have made it to the runoff, and then that would have given him a better shot at winning. Maybe if that 5% of people who voted for the Brand New Congress candidate instead endorsed and backed the viable progressive candidate, maybe the squad had been in double digits at this point. Now I'm going to address an elephant in the room. I'm talking about this, and this is very similar to the spoiler effect. And, people who are spoiler effect believers are well, yeah, this is a non-given. But of course, I'm not necessarily a spoiler effect person. To which I say, in the primaries, that's a little bit of a different story. In a primary, the jury, I could definitely see you at the very least making a little bit more sense in a primary talking about spoiler effect. But even then, it's I don't care. This isn't about spoiler effect. This is literally just because I don't feel it's needed. It's if Brand New Congress endorsed someone to run against Ro Khanna, it's no, that is completely unneeded. Or if they ran somebody against Bernie, it's no, why would you even consider doing this? And this isn't a one and done thing. This is a very consistent problem that Brand New Congress has. And to show you that, I'm going to list literally every single time that this has happened and explain the reasons as to why this is prevalent at all. Now, before I continue, I need to 100% preface it with this. I am not saying that the people that they back in these scenarios are bad choices, except for electorally. I'm not saying that these people are not progressives. I'm not saying that these people are frauds or grifters or anything of the sort. Well, I mean, with the exception of one, but we'll get to them when we get to them. This is literally just to show that this is an incredibly noticeable pattern that they do. And in fact, so much so, I've actually decided to exclude ones that could potentially be seen in this sphere, but don't fit, in my opinion. The two ones that come to mind are the current race for New York District 3, where they are endorsing Melanie Durango against Alessandra Biaggi. I don't necessarily view that as a bad choice, because I view Biaggi as less progressive than Durango. In fact, Biaggi barely qualifies because she's a Warren Dem. And another situation happened in the recent Texas 30 seat, where they backed Jessica Mason over a candidate by the name of Jasmine Crockett. Crockett is arguably less progressive than Mason, so I would argue that they made the right choice in backing Mason and not Crockett. But granted, Crockett is in the runoff. I think she's in the runoff, or she's the candidate at the moment. So, Crockett is the title that I give some people called the runoff progressive. The one you don't back at first, but then you come back around to them. But to get to the ones that are actual examples, here we go. First, we have in 2018, in the California District 12 seat, they chose to back Ryan Khojaste over Stephen Jaff and Shahid Buttar. Now, this race itself was actually kind of a shit show, to be honest, because there were 5 progressives in the race. An independent progressive, who's basically went on the convo couch type stuff, a Green Party candidate, and 3 Democrats, Ryan, Stephen, and Shahid. Stephen Jaff was a person that was basically making the rounds online, he was the Jimmy Dore choice. Meanwhile, Shahid was the one who actually ended up making the rounds on the ground, and you can tell that by the fact that they actually ended up being the closest to actually making it to the second round. But since there wasn't a conceded effort to back one of the candidates, the race was essentially done deal with Pelosi and Republican. And that's the reason why I backed Shahid Buttar in the 2020 election, because it's Shahid was the one who ended up getting the most votes, so objectively he's the best candidate of the ones running. And in a similar vein, we're actually going to get into the next one, which didn't take place until 2020. In Illinois District 7, running against the former DSA member, we had them back a current DSA member by the name of Anthony Clark over a candidate by the name of Keena Collins. Now, this one is really only included because of, again, it's them backing a candidate who ended up getting less votes over the candidate that ended up being the most viable. This was the one that was only shown via retrospect, because at the time, Anthony Clark was the one that was seen as the most viable because he was a previous candidate, and he didn't do that bad. Meanwhile, Keena was a newcomer, but as it ended up happening, Keena ended up prevailing over Clark, and that's why I'm backing Keena in the upcoming election for that same seat. Next one is Isaiah James in New York District 8 over the candidate by the name of Adam Bunkedeco. Now, again, I need to preface it. I like Isaiah. Isaiah is a good candidate. I supported him in the last race. I support him in this race if he's still running. I think he's been MIA for a while. I don't know. But here's the thing about Adam. Adam was endorsed by Zephyr Teachout. Abdullah El-Sayed, if I remember correctly, was a very viable progressive candidate because he had actually ran in the 2018 cycle and was actually very close to beating the incumbent that time. In fact, many people made a joke saying that Adam was closer to a congressional seat than Joseph Crowley was, because he ended up getting really close to actually beating the incumbent. I mean, again, I like Isaiah, but I don't understand why they snub Adam over to go to Isaiah. Though this is the first one that I actually started to notice things were going wrong, and it was in the New York 15 race where they backed a candidate by the name of Tomas Ramos over Samalis Lopez. Now, granted, due to the fact that they endorsed Tomas, I was also a supporter of Tomas, but as the race continued, I started realizing maybe I should change my mind, but I ended up just going, no, unless Tomas does something wrong, I have to stick with him to the end. And that was because endorsements started rolling into Samalis, to which I was like, Samalis was starting to be endorsed by the Working Families Party, DSA, AOC, Bernie, and she was in an incredibly tight race between the progressive Richie Torres and a wannabe Blue Dog. She was way closer than Tomas. Like, in the race, she was, like, in the top 4, and if she had gotten the support from, like, Tomas supporters and, like, maybe the support of, like, another progressive candidate in the race, then she probably would have been pushed over the edge. Tomas, on the other hand, got 7th place. Definitely a bit further off than Samalis was in 4th. Now, these next two are interesting for a different reason. They're not necessarily snubbing. I don't necessarily fault them for snubbing the incumbent, but I kind of just don't understand these bids to begin with. And these two bids are the two Oregon races that they ran in, with Albert Lee running against Earl Blumenauer and Doyle Canning running against Peter DeFazio. Now, these are two primaries I don't really get. I honestly do not understand why they ran these primaries at all, or even, like, just supported them. Peter DeFazio and Earl Blumenauer were really good representatives. Well, Earl Blumenauer is still in the House, and so is Peter, but Peter's on his way out. Peter DeFazio was one of the forefathers of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. I know we're not necessarily fans of them 100%, but at the time it was a big deal. And Earl Blumenauer was one of the first members of Congress that basically tried to be buddy-buddy with the squad. Aside from the 3 incumbent Justice Dems that they were backing. I'm not asking them to have supported them, but I'm just saying, like, why run a primary against them? Like, I asked Albert Lee at the time, like, why are you running against him? Like, I mean, on the issues that you're running on, Earl supports them. And then he said, like, oh, but Earl doesn't support this issue. It's like, but you're not running on that issue. You're running on these issues that Earl supports. And Doyle Canning, basically the same story, and it was the same thing for Jamal Bowman. Like, I mean, he was running against Elliot Engel, like, I support Medicare for All and the Green New Deal, and it's like, Engel was one of the first members of Congress who was, like, an incumbent to sign the Green New Deal pledge. He's a supporter of Medicare for All, and has been a consistent supporter of it. You gotta run on the things that he is bad at. And then Jamal Bowman, like, changed his, like, tune and started running against, like, Elliot Engel's foreign policy, because Elliot Engel was, like, a super, like, Israel supporter, and then Jamal Bowman was running on, like, I believe in a peace-based foreign policy, and I'm like, yeah, that's when I started to back him. And that was long before the hot mic incident that happened that made everybody hate Elliot Engel and think, like, oh, we must get rid of him. But I didn't really get mad at those two primaries at the time. This one, like, the next one, is one that I got incredibly mad at. In the 2021 election, in the New Mexico District 1 special election, they decided to back Celinda Guerrero over Antoinette Cedillo Lopez. This one perplexed me beyond any, like anything. This one just, like, completely floored me. Now, let me explain, for those who don't remember. New Mexico District 1 was the seat that Deb Haaland held before she went to become the Secretary of the Interior. Now, Antoinette was a candidate who ran against Deb Haaland in the last cycle, and she was actually a candidate to Haaland's left. Was more progressive than Haaland. Haaland was a Warren Dem. Antoinette was not. She was a progressive. So right off the bat, I already supported ASL, and thought that a lot more progressive organizations would probably back her. But strangely, very few of them actually did end up backing her. It was as the race went on that I started realizing, okay, maybe this is why they're not backing her. But then, for some reason, brand new Congress got on board and decided to back Celinda Guerrero. Now, here's the thing. I don't know much about her. I don't know if she's a good or bad candidate, all things considered. Guerrero was a activist who probably did a lot of good, and ASL was like a local government official who had done really well to continue her progressive platform. But the reason why this perplexed me was because this was not a primary. This was a committee selection. There would not be a single voter who would participate. This would be a Democratic Party, like the New Mexico Democratic Party would be the ones who chose who would be the nominee. And objectively, ASL was in a better position than Salindo Guerrero. In fact, so much so, ASL actually won the most votes in the first round, but since she didn't meet the threshold, they moved on to round 2, and she ended up losing. And that's why I made the assumption that that's why a lot of progressive organizations weren't getting involved, because this isn't a primary, it's a committee selection. But then Brand Congress just decides, hey, let's get involved anyways. The next special election that they got involved with, which actually kind of backfired in the long run, was the Florida District 20 race, where they backed Sheila McCormick over Omari Hardy. Now, let me explain why I had an issue with this. Omari Hardy had a similar situation. Omari Hardy was a pretty well-known member of, like, a city council or the state representative at the time, and he had already been well-known around the area through his very viral video where he was screaming at the mayor of the city at the time, and it said, like, you're cutting off people's electricity in the middle of a global pandemic. Meanwhile, Sheila was a nobody who we really had no clue. Like, I mean, well, she was not a nobody. She was a perennial candidate, but she had already lost this seat twice, so we were like, I don't think she's going to win. Lo and behold, this is one that actually backfired. And I'm only showing this again, to be fair. I have to show the whole pictures. Like, I could have cut this out and just said, oh, this has never worked before, but, I mean, clearly it's worked at least once. Now, this is a thing that they've continued for the 2022 elections, and this is when things truly hit a fan. First, we're going to go with the ones that don't necessarily hit fans quite yet. In Pennsylvania District 12, they endorsed Jerry Dickinson over Summer Lee. Now, Dickinson is similar to McCormick in the fact that Jerry is already a name that has been prevalent on the ballot, and this could potentially win in their favor because that's what happened last time. But the thing is, again, I have to reiterate some of the same things with Omari that I have to do with Summer Lee. Lee is a government official that is in a seat where the establishment is already lining up behind a corporate-backed candidate, and Lee is a progressive. Like, I mean, that's one of the big things. Again, she is a progressive, and so was Omari. Again, for someone like a Georgia Gomez, I would understand why they probably wouldn't want to back them. But this is someone who I think is deserving of backing. Like, Summer Lee is not a person who is anti-progressive. She is a progressive and has a progressive record. So why snub her over someone who has a less likely chance of winning, especially in a very viable seat for progressives to win? Another one is Illinois District 17, with Leticia Wallace being the candidate they're snubbing over a candidate by the name of Marsha Williams. Now, this one is interesting because there's actually been polling in the race, and it literally shows like Marsha Williams is like at 7%, and Leticia is winning, I think. If not winning, she's in the top 2. And Leticia, again, pretty prominent progressive figure in the state. She was the progressive lieutenant gubernatorial candidate. Granted, she was a downgrade from Carlos Ramirez Rosa, but she was still a progressive candidate and has a decently progressive record. She endorsed Bernie. She's done a lot of good in her state. She has like the big like story of like, oh, she was a single mother who worked her way up. And also, I don't necessarily want to play it poll, but Leticia is black and Marsha is not. That's probably not the reason why they're snubbing Leticia, because a lot of the other people that they're endorsing are black and black women at that. It's just an added thing that's like, I mean, I don't really see the problem with Leticia. Now, I saved these two for last because it's like, I mean, the second I saw them endorse these two, it's like, really? First, we're going to talk about Erica Smith, again, in North Carolina District 1. Now you might say, well, who's the candidate? They're not snubbing her over our candidates. I'm just mad at the fact that they're endorsing her at all. Because Erica Smith, this is one of the biggest problems I've had with Erica Smith, is that people who have no clue the history of Erica Smith are just taking her at her word for this cycle. Sure, she's running as this progressive firebrand, and it's trying to run oh yeah, I'm the super, far left type. That ain't how she was been in her entire career. Erica Smith was one of the most conservative Democrats when she was a state senator. She ran for Senate in 2020 and didn't endorse Medicare for All until literally the last second. In fact, she badmouthed Medicare for All while she was running for Senate. Because she basically did this weird thing where it's if Medicare for All comes to the desk, I guess I would vote for it. Hypothetically, maybe. She literally had, this was literally her pitch to be more, more progressive than Cal Cunningham. Her pitch was literally, she's a black woman. That's it. That's all you need. And that's proof that she's not Cal Cunningham. But she was essentially just Cal Cunningham, but black woman. Granted, she name-dropped the Green New Deal, but she didn't name-drop Medicare for All until literally the last second. No, I'm 100% dead serious. I was super informed in this race, because this was my Senate race. I was super informed. I looked through all of the information of the candidates I could find. Erica Smith was not supporting Medicare for All until we were driving on our way to do our early voting. And that's when I looked at her website one last time, and that's when there was magically a Medicare for All button on her site. She literally just put a button on her site where she talks about, I believe in affordable healthcare, and we need to expand healthcare access to all of our people, and then just added a button in the middle of it that said healthcare for all, and then when you click that button, it takes you to a hidden page on the site that says, oh, by the way, I support Medicare for All, essentially. After her 2020 Senate bid, she endorsed a Republican for the state house. She tried to back off of it, but she was literally included on a Republican's website as a list of supporters, and then she says, and then she retracted it, but didn't retract the endorsement. She retracted the idea that she endorsed her, but didn't really say anything bad about her. And you want to know why she endorsed that person? She endorsed that person because that person was running in the district of the person who was the forerunner at the time for the Democratic nomination for the Senate, which she won for herself, Jeff Jackson. Then, when it was just Jeff Jackson and Cherry Peasley, a person who Erica Smith described as the most conservative Democrat in the race, she endorsed Cherry Beasley, quote again, the most conservative Democrat in the race, over Jeff Jackson. And during the race, she was doing this thing where she was like, I support the police movement, when she was like, if only we had this position where we could see what the police officers were doing. And it's like, Erica, you literally voted for a bill to make body cam footage less easily accessible to the public. You want to know who was one of the two Democrats that actually said, no, we believe body cam footage should be available to the public? Jeff Jackson. But now Erica Smith can do a little rebrand, and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, yeah, she's progressive. Why are you not back her, dude? What's the problem? What's this hate you have over Erica Smith? Says a New Yorker. The last time a New Yorker got involved in the North Carolina Senate race, you know what happened? The candidate that they chose fucking lost. Now you saw how I got heated in that thing? Oh boy. I saved literally the most egregious example for last. This was the thing that essentially solidified that this was a huge problem for brand new Congress. For some unknown reason that completely escapes me, in the Pennsylvania Senate race, they decided to back Malcolm Kenyatta over John K. Fetterman. Now, there are a lot of you who probably don't know why this is a big deal. And that proves that you're fake fans. But let me explain. Unlike all those other ones where I had to keep prefacing, like, oh, I'm not saying these guys are bad candidates. Malcolm Kenyatta is a terrible candidate. Kenyatta has spent his entire political career up to the Senate bid bashing progressives. He was shit-talking Nina and Bernie relentlessly in the last cycles. He was spending his time bashing Bernie in the 2016 debate, saying like, Bernie, why don't you just shut up, dude? Come on, dude, you stupid. Come on. You know, we need to listen to a woman. And then there's like Hillary 2016. He was saying like, Nina Turner is such a stupid idiot. I mean, how could she not believe in Russiagate and all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. Like, he was spending his time, like his whole career, left bashing. Meanwhile, Fetterman is a borderline socialist, has a long-standing career in progressive politics, bashes people exclusively on the right, is supporting a ton of the progressive issues, Medicare for all, prime example, big thing, and is in the most high-profile Senate race in the 2022 election cycle. This is literally the make-or-break race. Make or break for progressives, make or break for Democrats, make or break for Republicans. This seat decides everything, which is why Super PAC money is funneling in to try and save a dying centrist bid for the seat, while Fetterman basically walks away with the race, and rightfully so, because he's the only candidate who can win. Polls have shown a general election scenario with Lamb and Fetterman. Fetterman easily wins. Lamb is half and half. With all that being said, why back Kenyatta? And this is the thing. I have made this very abundantly clear to brand new Congress. I have made this very abundantly clear. I've asked them multiple times, why back Kenyatta? All this stuff about Kenyatta, why are you doing this to Kenyatta? Like, why is Kenyatta the candidate you choose to back? And the head of brand new Congress, Adrian Bell, has blocked me for that. Especially when I pointed out that, like, she shared an image of, like, the brand new Congress header at the time, which literally showed Kenyatta next to Nina. The fact that Nina and Kenyatta were both on the same slate is like, why? Like, that shows us, like, what are you talking about? Like, what is this? It is pretty infuriating, to be honest. But be that as it may, I am not necessarily saying cancel brand new Congress. I'm not saying that. While yes, I will do everything in my power to make sure that we don't have Kenyatta even remotely close to the Senate seat, and do everything in our power to make sure that the actual viable progressive candidate, Fetterman, has that seat. We have to judge it on a case-by-case basis. But as I say, I think if your intention is to build a brand new Congress, you should probably focus on the viable progressive candidates in the race rather than backing the ones that have absolutely zero chance of making it. And that shows you my problems with brand new Congress. If you have any other organizations that you think should probably get the next episode, leave a comment below and maybe I'll get to it at one point. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified if a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, check out my articles on the Independent Political Report, or consider supporting me on Patreon.